anyways, for those who don't know me, I'm Nicole Scheidel, and I'm joined with my colleague Amanda Ackman to do our Age to Age series. And Amanda, you just came off a really exciting weekend in your hometown where you did, I would say, a pioneering event, something that's never been done before. So why don't you just sketch that out a little bit? Tell us a little bit about it.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to share with all of you. What I organized is a day-long event that was diocesan-wide with the theme, The Church as an Expert in Humanity. And what this day involved was really three parts. The morning involved a ministry hall of exhibits where we convened all of the ministries throughout the diocese, doing the best work around suffering, death, grief, accompaniment, and caregiving. So we had the Widows Ministry, we had Grief Share, we had the Infant and Miscarriage Ministry, we had an apologetics table about how to talk about assisted suicide, we had a book table. It was absolutely amazing. Then we had a wonderful Lebanese lunch served for everyone. In the afternoon, we had 3 panels, and those panels were really excellent. We had one that was called Tell Me About the Hour of Death, and this had 2 doctors, excellent physicians, and a priest, and also a deacon who has worked for a long time in pastoral care. We also had a panel that touched on some of the themes of the Age to Age series, during which I spoke about Pope Francis's Catechesis on the meaning and value of old age that we're exploring. We also looked at John Paul II's letter to the elderly and on Pope Benedict's encyclical on hope. In addition, that panel also had a funeral director. So some really great, excellent, formative, substantive content. Finally, in the evening, we had a beautiful evening program with the Bishop of Calgary, Bishop William McGrattan. And during the evening, we had 7 speakers give 3-minute testimonies. And these testimonies were presented as echoes of the 7 last words of Christ. We had a Middle Eastern refugee, we had a core member from the L'Arche community, we had an elderly woman, we had an Indigenous person, we had so many incredible testimonies that evening. And then after that, the bishop gave a reflection on the Anima Christi, and especially the line of that prayer that says, "In your wounds, hide me." And then the night concluded with adoration and benediction. So it was truly a pioneering event that I think activated my home community in the task of preventing euthanasia and encouraging hope. And so I'm happy I could sketch that for all of you, because many of the reflections that will come up throughout this evening will be borne out by some of the testimony heard during that day on Saturday.
Yes, and Marie McCann comments that it would be amazing if other dioceses held a similar event. And we have the blueprint for that. So if you want to do that in your diocese, reach out to us and we will help you facilitate that, because it was awesome. I think we'll have a video from it coming out and some great, just great responses from people that I think we'll get to share over the next few weeks, months, and send you links to things. But honestly, if you feel inspired by that, absolutely reach out to myself or Amanda. I'll put you, frankly, if you reach out to me, I'll put you in touch with Amanda. Maybe you only have my email address, and we'll make that happen, because it was awesome and it's worth doing again, I think. Yeah. Okay, great. So let's get to this catechesis on old age number 2, longevity, symbol, and opportunity. And so one of the things that really struck me when I was reading this audience, or this his general audience, was the first part was spaces of meaning of life. It's really that we have this obsession with haste, and when we don't connect, we lose contact with the slower rhythms of old age, closing up those spaces to everyone. And it really made me think about, as a child, the experience I had with my grandmother in particular. She lived with us for the first 10 years of my life. And just all the time, I have so many memories of her teaching me how to make pierogies, and so many moments that I think really helped shape me as a person. And I think parents are busy, and grandparents have that kind of time for their children. I don't know, Amanda, what do you think?
That's good. That reminds me of during the short panel remarks I made on Pope Francis's Catechesis, that part of this time that grandparents have for their grandchildren consists of the affirmation that they give to grandchildren. Pope Francis loves to speak about how the task and vocation of the elderly is to remind the young that they actually are a blessing, because there can be so much consternation over, why am I in the world? Is it really good that I exist? And sometimes in the haste of life, those messages of affirmation do not come to the rising generations. And so grandparents have the time to notice the young and to instill in them a confidence that really comes through the unique kind of affirmation that older people are capable of giving to younger people.
Well, and I would think honestly, when you're older, you have more patience because you've been there, done that. So you've kind of seen a lot of things that are maybe your children who are now parents have not seen before. And also, you're not with your grandchildren 24/7. And so you get to give them back to their parents. And so, in fact, I mean, we're human, right? People run out of patience and run out of energy. But as a grandparent, you have those moments of time when you can really, shower love on your grandchildren and help them see that it is good they exist. It is good that they are here, and really affirm them. Another point that really struck me from this general audience was his comment that modern cities tend to be hostile to the elderly, and not by chance also to children. And I was wondering if, I mean, you've traveled a lot, you've lived in many different parts of the world. Are there any cities that strike you as more conducive to like human interaction, human existence?
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly, looking at it, and specifically at the age range that he gives in the audience, he says life does not just consist of age 25 to 60. And I sometimes think that you can only really be a libertarian, well, maybe from 16 until till 60. It's kind of an age range where maybe you have a libertarian streak, but we know ultimately that we're born in dependency and vulnerability, and that's usually how our lives come to culminate. And so I can admit that as a young person, as able-bodied as I am, I'm not always mindful or conscientious of spaces that would be not particularly conducive to the flourishing of the young or to the old. But your question does make me think of seeing particularly the elderly in Europe in the main square of a town or in the public parks, and the way that I would see old men playing chess together in a public park, or the way that I would see couples kind of strolling through the main square. There are these places that are meant for strolling, that are meant for play, and that are safe. And I think those kinds of spaces are the hospitable environments that show that we want the young and the elderly to be a part of our lives. And so it matters that there are public spaces, parks and squares where people can stroll and leisure, where they're not fearful and they don't need to watch their back and they're not worried about it being an unsafe part of town, let alone all of the more basic questions of accessibility and just being able to move in those areas.
So would you say then that maybe the Italians, for example, or the where else have you lived?
Poland.
Poland, like that they have a different approach to rhythms of life. Like we're talking about this idea of haste, and we see that through this audience, like that where people are so busy, they're so hasty that they are missing the rhythms of life. Do you see a different rhythm of life in Europe, or that you don't see in North America?
Certainly it varies country to country and even region to region within the countries, but I would say that Italy is a very leisurely culture. It's a very festive culture, and I especially enjoyed the opportunity to have meals that were 3 or 4 hours long. And that's not just because I was in student mode and had a very leisurely lifestyle, but that's really because of the culture, because of the way that you've got your appetizers and your wine and your main course and your dessert and your drinks after, the liqueurs and everything. It's all very successive and leisurely. And that really facilitates conversation. I think that, like, I don't really recall seeing TVs in a lot of places, or there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of talking. And yeah, if you think Americans are loud, well, the Italian places are pretty loud too. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of enjoyment, a lot of festivity that I found in the countries in Europe where I've lived. And yeah, I love these reflections on the excess of haste. And he says that they make every experience more superficial and less nourishing. When we're hurrying and when we're trying to pack a lot in, we might think that we are filling ourselves because we're filling our time. But it's so interesting that this excess of haste, paradoxically, is not actually nourishing. And the bigger paradox that he comes to is that we've got to waste time, that we will only be nourished when we come to truly waste time. Of course, this is reminiscent of Joseph Pieper's reflections on leisure, the basis of culture, that it is in wasting time with the elderly, wasting time with children, that we actually are deeply nourished existentially. So maybe you have some reflections on how, contrary
no,
to the world and a bit counterculturally, there is real nourishment in that waste of time.
Yeah, no, it made me think about my own personal work with patients with dementia, and just having to slow right down and kind of go at their pace and let them lead. And how at first how it felt a little frustrating because you wanted to move things quickly, but then once you kind of slowed your pace down, you found it very enriching. I really enjoyed those times. And even like working with my father right now, and spending time with him and trying to go over things slowly, and just sit with him and be with him, just that kind of silence that you have, or that resting in love when you're sitting with someone who you really care about. I think that is just really good for the soul.
That's so true. And the time does stretch when you enter into that rhythm. And there's something so gratifying about seeing time kind of become multiplied. And I feel I've had those experiences of the Jewish Sabbath, of Shabbat, when for 25 hours you disconnect from tech, you are completely oriented around family and meals and relaxing and reading. And those 25 hours feel much longer than they are, because you're in a different plane of existence, and you kind of enter into something timeless and something even heavenly, which is the real point, and which is also what we're called to make of our Sundays. That Sunday would be a time of entering into contemplating eternity and getting out of the hustle and bustle of what is mundane.
So as you're talking about this, and we're talking about haste and spending time, it also makes me think about people who have a short amount of time, but because they spend it so intentionally together, it does stretch into infinity. And I'm reminded of that father that you interviewed whose daughter only lived a very short period of time. Do you want to tell us that story? I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, so John, who was also one of the 7 words speakers during the Saturday evening program with the bishop, he gave his testimony about the 38 minutes that he lived with his daughter. And it's just beautiful how, on the one hand, it was 38 minutes that she lived outside the womb and that she was in the world. But on the other, what his testimony really bears witness to is that ongoing unfolding of the relationship that deepens because he continues to remember her and speak about her, because he continues to share the memories of her with his son, who's 9 years old now. And you just see that in relishing the preciousness, there's a way in which he loves his child uniquely, that maybe someone who doesn't have the same experience may not quite realize the shortness of this life. And it has this kind of formative forging dimension to it, which is really, really beautiful to see.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes in our haste, we rush over moments when, if we really treasured them or paid attention to them, we would get so much more out of them, and we would in a way touch eternity, we miss those transcendent moments. I think especially if you're a mother with young children, it's very easy to miss transcendent moments that you should be having. And then maybe that's the joy of being a grandparent, is you get to recreate those moments that you maybe missed with your own children because life is busy, and you get to savor them a second time as a grandmother or grandfather. Yeah.
Mhm. There's also this great line that Pope Francis has about attention, which particularly affects the young, between rush and leavening. We know that on the one hand, we want things to kind of leaven, and so that we can be um, prepared gradually for all that we will meet in life, including those enigmas of life of which he speaks. And yet we are also compelled to do a lot of things in a rush. And so maybe when we open this up for discussion, we can explore a little bit with all of our participants how to kind of straddle this tension between rush and leavening.
Okay, very good. I have another point, and I love your take on it, where he says, the arrogance of the time on the clock must be converted into the beauty of the rhythms of life. And he really talks about, if we don't have that dialogue between the young and the elderly, we have a sterile society. And I think we see that right now, that there is a lot of sterility in our society because there isn't the richness of that dialogue.
That's right. And another one of the 7 words speakers who gave a beautiful testimony on Saturday is Eulalia, an Indigenous woman from Siksika Nation. And she spoke about her relationship with her grandparents. She was one of 6 children, and she explains how her mother was not able to raise all 6 children. And so the children were divided up between different relatives. And she saw her family regularly and knew that they had been divided up for a good reason. And she actually thrills at recalling the experience of being raised by her grandchildren. It made perfect sense. There was no deficiency there, pure richness. And she says this is something that she sees happening less and less, where grandparents are not involved, or they don't take up this role. And she really attributes all of her sense of solidity, all of her being anchored in this life, to that role of grandparents, which, as I told her, her life is a perfect echo of Pope Francis's Catechesis on grandparents, particularly where he speaks about how grandparents provide a point of reference. And in her testimony, she said, "My grandparents are the ones who held me in their hands and shaped me." So I think it's so beautiful, and I think we should open it up now for conversation, because I'm sure everyone is itching to get in on this, dying to comment maybe. And so, yes, let's hear from you, and particularly feel free to give these concrete expressions and examples of where you see the Pope's catechesis borne out in practice.
Sure. And so just a reminder, the way we'll do this, if you want to speak, raise your hand using the little button under reactions at the bottom. You'll see a little happy face for reactions. If you click on that, it allows you to raise your hand. And so you can raise your hand. That'll pop you up, because we have a lot of people on this call. So it'll pop you up to the top of the list. I'll be able to see you and bring you down into the discussion group, which is, yeah, great. Okay, we have our first guest, Rhonda Wood. Let me bring you down here. Okay. You got to unmute. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I just, first of all, thank you very much for doing this. I find it so amazing. Yeah, I'm just relating to everything you're saying, in the sense that my life has changed. Every Monday I'm with my parents. They're 93 and 92 on Mondays, and on Tuesdays I take care of my 3 grandchildren, whose ages are 3 to 7 months. So I recognize slowing down. Like, people who know me, I'm always, like most of us, very busy. But especially, well, in fact, today I had a lovely afternoon with my mother, but it's slow moving. It's giving her the attention. And I do recognize that I mean, she's very happy. They're very happy that I'm there, like, because I clean the house. I mean, I come from, a fairly large family, and all of us do our part so they can stay in their home. And I'm the cleaning lady. And she would just be happy if I just come and have tea with her. Like in the beginning, I would just run in and clean the house and would have lunch with her. But today, especially, I noticed that she just wants that stimulation, that someone's caring for her and, listening to her. And then again, with my grandchildren, I find it, as much as it's busy, I find it very relaxing, and it's just so beautiful. It's just really beautiful. I don't have to rush anywhere. I don't have to make any decisions. And it is a beautiful time of relationship for both ends of the spectrum. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's so beautiful. Amanda, what do you, so just picking up on that theme from Rhonda, just that sharing with, I know that your grandfather really inspired you in terms of what you did with your life. Actually, I'm going to cut you off there. I'm not going to go down that with that. I'm going to bring down Maria. Okay, Maria, let's have you come down here and tell us what you have to say.
Oh, I just so I just posted the link in the chat. I found it quick on Google, but there was this article from Tim Challies, the Protestant writer, and he had a really good article about how a lot of, I think often I've seen this in the church and in different circles, they'll sometimes say things like, this isn't your grandparents' church, or this isn't your grandparents' like insert thing, and they're probably trying to appeal to this idea of like, we're dynamic, we're hipping with it, et cetera, but he talks about how that's actually very, very demeaning to grandparents and to older people, because like strong churches and just any strong community needs everyone. Like, I understand that, it's nice. It can be nice to go to a church that has young families where there's like adorable little babies all around, and like, who doesn't love that? But I think like a church that didn't have any older people would be just really like, it would be so strange, and there would be such a lack there. But I guess it made me reflect on the importance of even just language, of when we say things like in the pro-life movement, people be like the youth are the future of the pro-life movement. And I'm like, okay, that's a lovely sentiment. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but I also don't want people to think that, helping make a difference in the world is only isolated again to like between 25 and 60, like that it can be kind of, I guess just can kind of invalidate the meaning of life in all ends of the spectrum. So yeah, it's a good article if anyone wants to read it.
Yeah, Maria, I want to just jump in on this because it really annoys me that they always have like, okay, first of all, Amanda gets to go to these under things that are only for the under 30 or only for the under 40, and I can never go to them because I'm too old, and I think like I could contribute, so why can't I be there? Anyways, I agree. I think sometimes we sell ourselves short as a society when we start to say things like that, or we don't invite people to contribute what they have like some people, maybe you had no time when you were 20 to 60, and now you have time and you have all that wisdom and you have so much to bring to the table. So I agree. I'm 100% with you on this one.
Well, as a 32-year-old, I'm learning the meaning of what it is to age out. So now we can be in solidarity with one another, that now that I'm no longer eligible for the under 30 opportunities. But these are excellent points. I'm so thankful that you raised them. And they're also reminding me of one of the panelists we had on Saturday, a Polish Dominican sister who has worked with seniors in the States. And she said, it seems we have so much going for us in terms of discounts and promotions and special opportunities and programming for seniors. And I think she was finding that there was a bit less of that in Canada. She's been here a year, so compared to the States to here. And it is interesting to consider, what are the forms of reverence? What are the forms of acknowledgement? And what are the kinds of unique opportunities that are provided for people later in life? So, Nicole, maybe you and I can pioneer some events that are specifically tailored to a demographic that is perhaps 70 plus. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. What would it be to say that in order to qualify, in order to be eligible, you have to have reached a certain age that is not normally the age that is a criterion for these kinds of things? And how
Yeah.
does designating something as for a specific demographic help to affirm and validate that their place in our community?
I also it just, that comment by Maria just also brought to mind, this weekend I was taking care of a retreat, and one of the women told me she had been a charge nurse in an emergency department, so she was in charge of the emergency department, and they had an older gentleman come in, and I don't remember what was happening, but it was clear he had about an hour to live, and his family was too far away. No one was going to get there in time, and they were in a smaller hospital. They couldn't get him to a bigger center. He just wasn't going to make it. And so she had two of her nurses sit with him, one for half an hour and then switch out for the other. So he was never left alone. And she said, we learned so much about him in that hour, all about his life. He was a veteran, like all the things that he contributed, all the things that he had done, like who he was as a man, as a human being. And she said it was such a privilege to share those last moments with him. And I think often we don't make space for that. We don't make space to recognize and affirm all the contributions that our parents and grandparents have made to build what we have today.
That's right. I encourage all of the people on this call to continue to raise your hand and contribute. This is a conversation, so anything that comes to mind, if you feel free to share. We really invite your comments here.
Yeah, and if you don't comment, I'll start pulling some of you out from the crowd, bringing you in. Have something to say.
I want to touch on the beginning as well, where he's talking about the relationship between longevity and genealogy. I thought this was quite imaginative, and talking about how mutual support among generations is indispensable in order to decipher experiences and confront the enigmas of life. This kind of necessary continuity. And then what are the substitutes and counterfeits if we don't insert ourselves into a story of genealogy, of longevity, of family history, of national history, of church history? Then what are the substitutes and the counterfeits? What kinds of shallower means of situating ourselves or of finding points of reference do we see? I think sometimes we see that perhaps with pronouns in an email signature line. What really does this do to situate a person or to anchor them? It's a shallow form of identification that bespeaks a kind of poverty of being inserted into a larger story.
Okay, I'm going to bring John down. I don't know, John, if you want to comment on that or just you have something. Oh, no, sorry. I don't want to replace you. I want to join you. Okay, we're going to come with you too. Just a second here. Okay,
No
there we are.
problem.
Okay.
Sorry about the bad lighting. Yeah, I think the replacement is an ideological frame of reference when people don't have stories and traditions and things to latch onto. There are oftentimes simplistic explanations for how to make sense of the world. I was at a protest and a counter protest that happened just this past Wednesday all across Canada. And I took my time to go to the side that I was not aligned with, just to listen and understand. And I think a lot of the people, this was on kind of on the gender side of things. You're talking about gender pronouns there, Amanda, and just trying to listen to what are the explanations that people have for their worldview. And it seemed very flat. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of people who are, this was around like kind of parental rights and that intergenerational relationship that people are trying to protect, to pass on their values, to pass on their narratives, to have that continuity. And yeah, it was interesting to see that, because I tend to be in the more intergenerational space. I'm not like a particularly ideologically aligned person, and it was interesting to see how much of that meaning there was some community there, but it seemed shallow compared to other communities that I've seen. So it's a poor replacement.
Thank you for
Thanks for
that.
sharing.
Okay, Rhonda, you have something to say. You're back. Hi,
Yes.
Rhonda.
Hi, sorry, I don't mean to, something came to mind that I was having a conversation with someone on the weekend. So I think this this whole setup or the talk of the apostolic letter, I think that's what it's called, that Pope Francis has done, all your work that you've done, Amanda. So I'm talking personally. I think that my children and myself, my family, have been very spoiled. Like, we're very blessed. We have a very close family. And sometimes I think it's taken for granted. And maybe, and you see society doing the same. And so not this whole reaching out of people being aware of the elderly, especially who have so much history and so much to give. I mean, I read a beautiful article. I don't know if you've heard of Epoch News. They do a lot of articles like this, and the traditions. And yeah, it's just a personal thing that there's such a richness with the elderly, and it's being ignored in many ways. And it's so unfortunate, because it used to be that families were all together in a neighborhood, but now you have parents and their kids are like all over the place. And
Rhonda, what do you think the reason is?
I think that there's been a loss of the dignity of the person. I think God has been taken out of the equation. People are very materialistic, and like you say, like you talked about earlier, just taking that time to be with others. What do you think the reason is?
Well, probably it's a plurality of factors, so thank you for naming some of them. On the one hand, I do think there's a real deficit of experience. Somehow there's this breakdown in the chain of tradition, where if someone hasn't had a particular experience, it's hard for them to reverence it, to value it. If I didn't have the relationships that I had with my grandparents, I probably wouldn't be the same person. And so, but for the grace of those experiences, I would this is what I have to tell you. And so I think it's like this with a lot of things, with whether it be marriage in the family, or whether it be a certain kind of education, whatever it may be, that we need to have an experience of something in order to appreciate it and in order to pass it on. And where there have been chasms there, it's very hard to rekindle the reverence for those values in our lives.
So Lacey, did you want to come down and have something to say? You can just wave your hand, yes or no. I'm looking at you. Yes, you want to come in? Okay,
Lena has her hand up too.
Yeah, I know, but I'm going to bring them down and ask them to unmute. And are you able to unmute your computer? Great. Yeah, you're unmuted. Did you have something to say?
Looking for the little handle how I can put it. I couldn't find it, but I was listening to all these interesting stories and compositions, and what Amanda was saying about living in Italy, and we were in Peru, and they had these large families who practically lived in a compound. Grandmother and grandfather started a little house, and then they bought properties alongside it, and it grew into almost like a little village. Everybody was living together. They have invited us many times to participate with their birthdays or anything like that, and everybody had their jobs. And when we came back to Canada, then we found the same situation evolved. And when we had a couple of seniors, one had heart attack, the other had some stroke, and the young ones spent a lot of time traveling and visiting them and spending a time. And we decided to build a large house on a large property where grandparents and their young ones are living together, not in the same. It's like a multiple sections, and the great grandkids are coming over and asking grandma and grandpa, or Oma and Opa, depending on who they can nail, and they do like to learn what the experiences of the old timers were when they were younger, or when they were working, or what parts of the world they have seen. And I can just see the kids and grandkids and great grandkids are enjoying it so much. And that's all I wanted to just.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that. That is so wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Lena, what do you have to tell us? Oh, you're muted, sorry.
Okay, so one thing I feel that it adds to the chasm, I guess, between the older generation and the younger ones. And listen, I can talk about myself and my mom. So she's in her late 70s, but she's worked all her life. She's always been very active. She's always been very independent. Now she comes here. Well, yeah, with age, you slow down. We all do. But like, sometimes I'm telling my mom something and she just doesn't get it right away. And it frustrates me because I feel like, why aren't you getting it? You're smart, you're educated, you've worked all your life. So, and even if I don't say anything, I feel that my mom senses. Just because they're old, that doesn't mean that they are stupid. They hear, they understand, they can see, and it just creates a bigger problem. So we just need to, and I mean, I caught on to that, and I try, me and my sister, to work with her to, you know, we've always had, like, generation after generation. I come from the Middle East, from Lebanon. We always have grandparents living in. You hardly ever. My mother-in-law had dementia. She did not know me. She did not know my kids. She did not recognize us. But she was in my house for 3 years. My husband would not let go until the last day. And I know the kids, that's stuck in their heads. So on the one hand, yes, they say, we want to be there with you and for you when you're old, just like you were with grandma. But at the same time, we need to just slow down a bit more and realize, yes, they our parents, our grandparents, they're a gift that we can never get back once they go. And so we just need to teach our kids to just slow down. We need to teach ourselves to just slow down and enjoy this time with them.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say, sometimes the frustration is thrust upon us too. I was trying to help my dad with his iPhone. I don't have an iPhone, so I was as confused and frustrated as he was. Yeah, so that, I really appreciate that you do have to watch your own body language and your own tone and make sure that you're not expressing your frustration and creating a gap or between in your relationship.
I really appreciate you pointing out some of the natural frustrations and friction too, though, because we don't want to romanticize or over idealize these things. Intergenerational solidarity, encounter, the symphony in society. Pope Francis has a lot of elegant language for all of this. And at the same time, he knows and we know that life is really messy and that all of these aspirations are full of challenge and they require a lot of audacity. They require a lot of virtue and a lot of practice. And so I also appreciate what you said about Lebanon. Lebanon is such an incredible place. And
Yeah, you were
I think
there.
that, yeah, I think what really comes to mind is through everything you shared is that as a psychiatrist said to me recently, one of the excellent ones with whom both Nicole and I work, he was encouraging me and he said, the perfection consists in the doing, and just doing it is what really counts. And so even if it's difficult and arduous, and even if there are misunderstandings and we can get short with one another and all of that, ultimately what stands and what holds in terms of eternal significance and meaning is the fact of doing it anyway. So yeah, thanks for all that you shared.
Okay, we're going to bring back John. Yes, John.
Yeah, hey. Thanks for sharing, Lena. My grandmother on my mother's side stayed with my aunt and my cousins for 7 years, and she had dementia as well. And it was such a beautiful, inspiring thing for them, and it was such a beautiful witness to the importance of family and having those communal experiences and having her with us. It's not always possible. I know there are difficulties financially and for other reasons that may make that difficult for families, but it was such a beautiful thing. So I just wanted to mention that. And on the intergenerational, like living in compounds, I think Pope Francis says, let us imagine a city in which coexistence among the different ages form an integral part of the overall plan of its habitat. So having those kind of familial compounds or properties together. I thought that example that was brought up, I forgot the name of Lacey's husband there, but was such a beautiful example, or in Italy. And it was juxtaposed in my mind, I think goes down to one of the problems that is in society today. I was listening to an interview with a gentleman who did 3 years of going into poor cities in the States and trying to understand some of the poverty issues that were there. And he was saying there was a building that had 6,000 residents. And out of those 6,000 residents, most of them were, younger people with children. There were 12 intact families out of 6,000 people living in the residence. So just the family breakdown and how that causes issues, not just for, that nuclear family that's now split up and the children, but intergenerationally. If you want to be with your grandparents, well, maybe you see grandma and not the grandparents together because they're no longer together, or in those family get-togethers, it's kind of split up, and it causes issues having that intergenerational relationship and grateful giving and generous receiving take place. So I think that's another one of the issues, is just real family breakdown, how rampant and common it is, and where a lot of times you've got single mothers who are in difficult situations. My sister's in New York and helping single mothers who are expecting or have young children, how much need there is. And a lot of that gets brought up into the state instead of families in a very subsidiary way, helping each other, helping friends, and being able to have those co-relational, tight-knit local communities that are built up. It then kind of fractures, I think, a bit more. So anyways.
Thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
Oh,
See, Maria has her hand up.
yeah, she has. She's coming back in for round 2. She's gonna make me feel really good.
um, so I actually had kind of a question. So I was speaking with a friend recently, and she has a elderly family member who she's helping to care for, and he has like Parkinson's and I think dementia and like sort of a whole host of health problems, and it's so, you know, cognitively he's losing some of his like cognitive abilities, and then also losing motor skills and stuff. And she talked about how difficult it was to communicate with him, because it was hard to know, like, is he not doing X because he feels too weak to do it, or because he forgot to do it? And she felt like she'd have to remind him to do things, you know, 50 times. And she said by, you know, the fourth or fifth time, she's saying it less patiently than she did before. And I was kind of at a loss of what to say, because I've dealt with like losing family members and like family members with disability and things like that, but I'd never been in a situation where of trying to like love someone who's in that sort of situation. And I just didn't know if anybody in the peanut gallery had advice on like the best way to to love those people and with, while acknowledging that it is very hard and frustrating when it's very hard to like communicate with someone and care for them and stuff.
Well, I have two ideas. So I'll just, one of them is, I think writing things down in big print so people can read them is also very helpful. I find that helpful with my dad, to write things down and then he can look at it and it helps remind him instead of repeating. Because I agree, when you're repeating all the time, it's easy to let the impatience get into your voice. There's also a lovely YouTube video of a older man sitting with his son on a park bench, and I think he's asking, what is that? And it's the sound of a bird, and his son's, it's a bird, it's a bird, it's a bird. And then his son loses his patience and just yells at his dad. So then his dad goes into the house, brings out his diary from when his son was little, and it's the same story but in reverse, where his little son was going, what is that, what is that? And his dad kept telling him over and over again, it's a bird, it's a bird, but with a lot of patience and love and joy. And the son was like shamed into, like, your dad had all this patience with you and you had none with him. And it just, like, right now my father's staying with us, and so I'm sleeping downstairs so I can be near him. And I'm just thinking of all the times when I was little and he would comfort me when I'd have nightmares, and he would come and like sit by my bed and wait till I fell asleep again. And like, man, it's payback time, and I'm happy and grateful to be able to pay that back. But I think sometimes we lose our memory of what we owe to the people who raised us or took care of us. So those are my thoughts on that. Amanda, do you have anything to say or
Great
reflect on?
stories. Thank you for
Okay.
sharing. Yeah, that's so good. And it just reminds me of that meme going around Facebook that says, don't mock me for not knowing how to use this techie thing because I taught you how to use a spoon. And yeah, like it's true. And with dementia in particular, how it can be we who forget those who are losing their memory. And just to kind of make the meaning out of that is meant for us to receive. When you spoke about writing, of course, you meant writing it down so as to not need to repeat, but I think also writing in a sort of journaling way, personally or privately, to take note of things, to take stock of these realities, because there is a way in which externally there is a kind of senselessness to it, which makes it very hard for a very secular society to contend with, again, to use this excellent term, the enigmas of life, as Pope Francis puts it. But I think when we do write about it and we tell stories, then the meaning is borne out. Like, who could listen to the story you just told about your dad and not be moved into seeing that as, that's right, that registers, that checks out. And so, again, it comes back to, do we have a deficit of experience? Do we have an existential poverty? And for we who have forms of existential richness, thanks be to God, to tell these stories as a means of evangelizing the culture about what's possible and what the best really can look like.
Okay, thank you. Samantha, I'm going to bring you down, but I want you to turn on your video so we can see you. Unless you want to remain a woman of mystery, and then you could just ask your question.
Yeah, I have some issue with my camera. It's not
Okay, okay,
that,
okay. So
that,
you can
yeah.
remain a woman of mystery and you can just ask your question or make your comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's very weird. Sorry. And I was going to stop that. Apologies for my video out. But I really wanted because it's something that Amanda said, and that was so in alignment with what I had in mind about telling stories. And I think even with the question that was asked just earlier, I think just reminding them over and over of those stories, like I remember the parents taking pictures and just like creating this album of just photos and moments and just make them rewatch that, revisit that. Do you remember when this happened, or do you remember? And without a sense of, or without like when the Pope is talking about rush, without having an output on, yeah, an output in mind, because I think that's what creates the frustration and just, and that's hard on the person, but just being the present. Just like this, there's a power in the presence. There's power in being with that person at that moment. And like if it's the last moment, like and like you just can't that's just what helps me whenever I'm with my grandparents, and mind you, they don't even speak neither French or English. So sometimes you just need, so sometimes you can't, so sometimes she will talk to you in another language and you're like, what exactly is she telling me? But I can see within her eyes, and I'm thinking about my grandmother here, that she's telling me, she's trying to transmit something to me. So there's power in just in the presence. Sometimes even the language will be a barrier, the mind will be a barrier, the the physical will be a barrier, but just being there. They are not stupid, as someone said. They can feel it, and that's it. So if they can see a video, if they can rewatch, if they can see some pictures, um, I think it matters and it counts. This is
Thank
what
you so much. Yes, I agree. Actually, that reminds me too. One thing, if you're working with pictures and seniors who may have cognitive deficits, to label the pictures with the people who are in it, because that will be a trigger and it will help them remember. And if they just look at a picture and they can't remember, that's just very frustrating. And so you want to reduce frustrations as much as possible. And that's why labeling things, it's not, yeah, writing things down, writing down names of people, writing down things on a calendar, all those things are great memory triggers for working with seniors or the elderly who may have trouble remembering things. So, okay. Well, I think if that's it for tonight, we're going to end a few minutes early. We have some other things that have to happen, particularly a wedding that has to get ready for this Friday in my house. So we're very excited, but we're just delighted to be here today with you and talk about this really important letter, and looking forward to the next months together. And yeah, so I don't know, Amanda, if you have any last comments.
I'll simply say, again, feel free to email us with any feedback if you want to share thoughts that occur to you between the sessions, or if you have advice for how we can make these even more fruitful, you can always write to us.
Oh, and actually, just on that point, I have on the website put the dates of all the evenings that we're doing, the Monday evenings, and I'm linking to each letter so you can, at your own pace, have a chance to read them. I know this week I was late getting out the email with the letter for tonight, but we'll try and fix that. So on the website itself, the age2age series.ca is where you can find it. And I've listed them all. So that way it's easier for you to keep track, and also just do your own reading as you like. So with that being said,
Nicole, is that the website, Age to Age?
yes, I will put that in the chat for everybody. There, I think, did that go to everybody? Okay. Yeah, so age2age series.ca is where you'll find it. And if you scroll down to the bottom, it's there now. Okay. Okay, so we'll just end with a prayer because I think that's a very good way to end. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for helping us turn our minds to where you want us to look to help our society grow, to reach out to others, to heal some of the wounds we see, and to help us find ways to waste time with each other, but through that wasting of time to touch eternity. We thank you, our Lord, and especially turn our eyes towards Mary, who was, I guess, maybe the perfect waster of time because she really knew how to be present with our Lord, with her friends, with all of humanity. So we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thank you very much for this, and we will see you in 2 weeks, and hopefully you'll see the video sooner than that. Okay, good night, everyone.
Take care. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.